In bread making with Doug. Today we're going to try something a little different, a buttermilk sourdough. We're only going to make one loaf of this, and to do this we're going to create an overnight sponge. So that means that we can take just simply three ingredients: our starter, flour, and buttermilk. Do a little bit of rise and some of the yeast growth, and then tomorrow morning we will add some more flour and the rest of the ingredients and let it bulk rise and finish the loaf of bread. Okay, so just to get it ready tonight, we're going to take a couple of different things. We're going to need buttermilk, 300 grams. Again, if you've been watching some of my other videos, we do everything by weight. So in this case, we're going to, as I said, I like to separately prepare my ingredients and measure them out. No, that comes out to 303. I think I'll live with that. I like to measure them separately so that if for some reason, like in that instance, I overdo it, I can make the correction before it's all in the main mix. Alright, so we have that. We're going to get our flour next. Let's zero this out. And we're going to need, didn't finish zeroing. We're going to need 150 grams of flour. We're doing this on New Year's Eve, so you may hear some fireworks in the background. Okay, 150. I went to 155, but since I went over on the buttermilk, I think we'll be good. Okay, now what I need to do is measure out 100 grams of starter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pour my buttermilk in with my flour so that I can reuse this bowl. You can see this is some pretty good lively starter. It has some, I don't know if you can tell, we've got some liquid that is building up. That's alcohol that is a byproduct of the yeast fermentation. So when you get a little bit of that liquid on the top, to keep your hydration ratio right, I like to make sure we mix it back in again. It's also part of your flavor. Okay. 100 grams is not really much. We're at 90, 78, 100. One a little above. So the three ingredients we have are 100 grams of starter, the 300 grams of buttermilk, and 150 grams of white unbleached flour. And we're going to get that mixed to where there are no dry spots. We're going to cover it, leave it out on the counter overnight. Probably going to put it on my heating pad, but I don't really need to worry about enhancing the activity overnight too much. It's time to take a look at our sponge for our buttermilk sourdough. You can see that it's had some activity overnight. We're going to add in the remaining ingredients. I thought about it and decided that I would make this an onion dill buttermilk sourdough. So we're going to add just a couple simple things here. We're going to put in some salt, a teaspoon of salt, some dill weed, and this is about a half tablespoon. This is only one loaf, so I don't want to overdo it, but it's amazing how you can add what looks like a lot of dill that still doesn't add a whole lot of flavor. It smells great when it's baking, but doesn't overpower it. And then chopped onion, dried chopped onion, that I put some warm water with to kind of reconstitute it a little bit. And that's about a quarter cup. We're going to add some flour in just a minute. You can see that this is a bit bubbly. But before I add the flour, I want to see if I can integrate these spices in here a little better. As you see, they kind of just disappeared. Okay. Flour is going to be 300 grams. And this recipe says 2 to 3 tablespoons of warm water. That's going to depend on the humidity that you have going on, time of year. So we have 3 tablespoons measured out. We'll just see how the dough is going to handle this. We're going to combine this really well, and then we're going to cover it for an hour to get some bulk fermentation. I think I'll just put all the rest of that water in there, excuse me, and I might even have to add some more. We'll have to see. If you play around with dough enough, you'll recognize when it's too dry or too wet, when you have to add water, when you have to add flour. This looks like we may actually have to add a little more water to this. I'm going to say maybe another tablespoon. Integrated the flour and the water into the mix, and we're going to let this sit covered for about an hour. I'm going to put it on the bread pillow that I have, the heated bread pillow, to give it a little warmth. So in an hour we'll take a look at that. It should be doubled. That's the bulk ferment. Meantime, I'm also going to refresh my starter, and that's going to be with 50 grams of whole wheat, 200 grams of unbleached white, and then we're going to put in, I have to measure it out, but we're going to put in 200 grams of water that's somewhere between 90 and 95 degrees. We let it sit for about an hour, actually almost an hour and a half now. We're going to if we had enough room in the pan, we could do some pulls and folds to help build up the gluten, and we can do that, but I'm thinking it might be easier to just flour our hands and flour the board and maybe just do a little bit of kneading to make sure we've got a good strong structure here. Okay. If it was in the bowl, you could probably just have pulled it like and made an envelope. What we're doing here is making sort of an envelope fold. I don't want to work the dough too much, but the idea is to get some strength in your gluten. What that does is traps the CO2 gas that your yeast produces. The two key things about bread in history are that flour produces a gluten that traps and holds the CO2. The yeast creates the carbon dioxide that will give the bread its rise. Okay, now we're going to put this back in for most of its bulk ferment. This is probably going to go for a couple of hours till it is doubled. Then we're going to shape it. I thought I would show you how nicely our starter has come back. Actually, I had the lid on here and it was pressed up against the lid, which I took off. So I've got a choice of leaving it like this or maybe splitting it. I think I'll put some in another container. But feeding did very well with that. It's happy now, and we'll be able to do some more sourdough in the next couple of days. But I will keep that in the refrigerator until the day before I actually want to be using it. So, but you can see it's happy. Well, let's have a look at what we're working with. As you can see, we got a nice rise so far out of our dough. We're going to turn this out onto our floured board, and then we're going to do a little bit of shaping with it. But we don't really want to knock this down too much. Okay, we're going to flour our banneton, our proofing basket. With sourdoughs, they tend to be kind of sticky, hydrated doughs sometimes, so I try to make sure I've got this well floured so we don't have problems getting out of our proofing basket when time comes. Okay, we'll set that there. Probably going to need our bench knife on this. And really all we want to do is just give it one final shaping that tightens it up more. Get it into a ball, although it's looking pretty good to me. That usually means just taking it and, if we get this on the screen, kind of dragging it to get some tension in it. Not too much to deflate it, but seam side down in the bowl. That's looking good. We're going to let that rise a little bit more. But since we have most of our, I flour it just so it won't stick to the basket a little bit. Since it's pretty well done with its bulk fermenting, we'll do a little proof fermenting, but we don't want it to go too far, too fast, and overproof it. So we're going to slip it into a plastic bag. The kind that I use are vegetable bags from the store. Slip it in that, put it in the refrigerator. We're going to preheat our oven. Our next step is to take our proofing basket out of the refrigerator, and we're going to turn this over onto our board. Fingers crossed it comes out. Yes, it did. Okay, you can see it already has a crack that it likes. We're going to put another steam split in it. We're going to scoop that up, put it in our Dutch oven, put the lid on it, and that's going to go into the oven, which has been preheating, 450 degrees. We're going to bake that for 50 minutes. The last 5, we're going to take the lid off and get some crust browning on it. So we'll check on it then. It's now time to take the lid off of our onion dill buttermilk. Looks really very nice. We're going to leave it in there another few minutes to brown up. Looking good. It's time to take the sourdough buttermilk with onion and dill out. As you can see, it looks really amazing. We've got some nice color on it. Let's tip that out. As you can see, it really looks good, has some nice color. We've got patterning on it from the proofing bowl. You can see a little bit of that design. Even though I tried to get a nice split in there with my lame, it had already decided it was going in another direction, but that's okay. As I've said, the dough kind of does its own thing. So, this is the sourdough buttermilk loaf with dill and onion. Thanks to brother-in-law John for that seasoning tip. And we'll probably slice into it later and have it with dinner. Thanks for joining us on Adventures in Bread Making with Doug. Okay, we're going to slice into this. We're going to go right down the middle. It's still fairly warm, but you can see that it looks good. A nice soft crumb, crunchy crust, smells delicious. That is our buttermilk sourdough with dill and onion. Check in next time for another loaf.